In the dark corridors of true crime history, few death row cases have shaken America like the one we're about to uncover. This is about Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal, a man whose execution would come not from the state, but from the hands of another inmate. His last words, his final meal that never was, and the 17 lives he destroyed paint one of the most disturbing death row narratives in American criminal history. Hit that like button and subscribe to be part of our growing community. Also, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. The Boy Who Collected Death. Before Jeffrey Dahmer became synonymous with unspeakable horror, he was just a boy born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Picture a young Jeffrey wandering the woods behind his childhood home in Bath, Ohio. While other children played baseball or rode bikes, he collected roadkill. He'd bring dead animals home, not out of cruelty at first, but curiosity. He wanted to understand what was inside. He wanted to see the bones, the structure, the permanence of what remained after life had fled. His father, Lionel Dahmer, was a chemist. He taught Jeffrey how to bleach and preserve animal bones. It was supposed to be educational, a father-son bonding moment over science. But in Jeffrey's mind, something twisted was taking root. The fascination with death wasn't fading, it was growing. As adolescence crept in, so did the isolation. Jeffrey became withdrawn, uncommunicative, invisible in his own home. His parents' marriage was crumbling. Arguments echoed through the house. His mother struggled with mental illness and prescription pill dependency. His father buried himself in work. And Jeffrey? Jeffrey turned to alcohol. By high school he was drinking heavily. Vodka hidden in soda cans, beer before class, anything to numb the emptiness that was eating him alive from the inside. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. While his classmates worried about prom dates and college applications, Jeffrey's fantasies turned violent. He began imagining what it would be like to be with someone who couldn't leave him, someone who would stay forever. The loneliness, the abandonment, the fear of rejection, it all began to twist into something unrecognizable. Was this when Jeffrey Dahmer died and the Milwaukee Cannibal was born? Or was there still time to save him? Could anyone have seen the signs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The first kill. June 1978. Jeffrey Dahmer had just graduated from Revere High School. He was 18 years old, legally an adult, but emotionally still that lost, lonely boy collecting bones in the woods. His parents had separated. His mother had moved away with his younger brother. His father was living elsewhere temporarily. Jeffrey was alone in the family home. And that's when Stephen Hicks made the fatal mistake of accepting a ride. Stephen was 19, a hitchhiker looking to get to a rock concert. Jeffrey picked him up, invited him back to the house for beer and music. Stephen agreed. Why wouldn't he? Jeffrey seemed harmless, quiet, awkward but friendly enough. But when Stephen tried to leave, something inside Jeffrey snapped. He couldn't let him go. He couldn't be alone again. Jeffrey picked up a barbell and struck Stephen across the back of the head. Then he strangled him with the bar until Stephen stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped existing as anything more than a body that would never leave. What happened next is where Jeffrey Dahmer crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. He dismembered Stephen's body. He packed the remains into garbage bags and buried them in the woods behind the house. Later, he dug them up, crushed the bones with a sledgehammer, and scattered them across the property. Stephen Hicks disappeared. His family searched for years. And Jeffrey Dahmer? He tried to move on. He joined the army. He got discharged for alcoholism. He moved in with his grandmother in Wisconsin. He worked odd jobs. He got arrested for indecent exposure. He attended church with his grandmother, For 9 years he didn't kill again. 9 years of silence, 9 years where the monster slept. But monsters don't sleep forever. The Milwaukee Apartment of Horrors. September 1987, Jeffrey Dahmer was living in Milwaukee, and the hunger, that gnawing, unbearable need for control, for companionship, for someone who couldn't reject him, came roaring back. Stephen Tuomi became the second victim. They met at a bar. Jeffrey drugged him, took him to a hotel room. When Jeffrey woke up the next morning, Stephen was dead. Jeffrey claimed he didn't remember killing him, that he'd blacked out from alcohol. But whether that's true or not, the pattern was set. And this time, Jeffrey didn't stop. Over the next 4 years, 15 more young men and boys would enter Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment at 924 North 25th Street. None of them would leave alive. His victims were chosen carefully, mostly young men of color, often poor, sometimes sex workers, always vulnerable, people society had already marginalized. People whose disappearances wouldn't immediately trigger massive investigations. Jeffrey knew exactly what he was doing. He'd meet them at bars, bus stops, shopping malls. He'd offer them money for photos or companionship. He'd bring them to his apartment. He'd drug their drinks. And when they were unconscious, helpless, unable to resist or reject him, Jeffrey would strangle them. But the killing wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of his horrific ritual. Jeffrey engaged in necrophilia with the bodies. He dismembered them meticulously, keeping skulls, bones, and other body parts as souvenirs. He photographed every stage of the process. He stored body parts in his refrigerator, his freezer, a 57-gallon drum filled with acid. He even ate portions of his victims, later claiming it made him feel like they were a permanent part of him. Wait, what? Yes, you heard that right. Cannibalism. This is where Jeffrey Dahmer earned his horrifying nickname, the Milwaukee Cannibal. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his crimes was his attempt to create zombies, living, compliant companions who would never leave. He'd drill holes into his victims' skulls while they were still alive, inject hydrochloric acid or boiling water directly into their brains, attempting to create a lobotomized, submissive partner. It never worked. They all died. But Jeffrey kept trying, kept killing, kept descending deeper into his nightmare. How did nobody notice? How did this happen for 4 years in a crowded apartment building? The answer is as disturbing as the crimes themselves. May 27, 1991. This date should haunt every police officer who worked that night. 14-year-old Konerak Sinthasomphone escaped from Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment, naked, bleeding, drugged, and disoriented. 3 women found him and called 911. When police arrived, Jeffrey emerged from his apartment, calm and composed, claiming Konerak was his 19-year-old boyfriend and they'd had a lover's quarrel. The officers believed him. Despite the women's protests, despite Konerak's clear distress, despite the boy being a minor and obviously drugged, the police escorted Konerak back to Jeffrey's apartment. Back to apartment 213. Back to hell. The officers never checked Jeffrey's background. If they had, they would have discovered he was a convicted child molester on probation. They would have learned that Konerak's older brother had been one of Jeffrey's previous victims. They would have saved Konerak's life. Instead, they left him there. And Jeffrey killed him that same night. The night justice finally came. July 22, 1991. Tracy Edwards made a decision that would finally end Jeffrey Dahmer's reign of terror. Tracy had been lured to apartment 213 with the same promises Jeffrey had used dozens of times before. But when Jeffrey tried to handcuff him, Tracy fought back. He punched Jeffrey, broke free, and ran into the street with one handcuff dangling from his wrist. He flagged down a police car. Officers Robert Routh and Rolf Mueller followed Tracy back to Jeffrey's apartment. When Jeffrey answered the door, he was calm, almost cooperative. But when the officers asked for the key to the handcuffs and stepped inside to search for it, they found the Polaroids. Photographs of dismembered bodies, photographs of corpses in various states of decomposition, photographs documenting every stage of Jeffrey's gruesome process. Officer Mueller radioed for backup. "We've got a situation here." When they opened the refrigerator, they found a human head. In the freezer, more body parts. In the bedroom, skulls. In the 57-gallon drum, 3 torsos dissolving in acid. 74 Polaroids in total, 17 victims over 13 years. Jeffrey didn't resist arrest. He simply said, "For what I did, I should be dead." The trial began in January 1992 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The question wasn't whether Jeffrey Dahmer had committed these horrific crimes. He'd confessed to everything. The question was he legally insane? Jeffrey's defense attorneys argued that no sane person could do what he did. They presented psychiatrists who diagnosed him with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and psychotic disorder. They painted a picture of a man tortured by compulsions he couldn't control. But the prosecution had their own psychiatrists who evaluated Jeffrey and found him legally sane. Yes, he had mental health issues. Yes, his crimes were beyond comprehension. But he knew what he was doing was wrong. Planned his crimes meticulously. He went to great lengths to avoid detection. He understood the difference between right and wrong. He simply chose wrong over and over again. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Guilty, sane, responsible. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, 957 years in prison. Later, he'd receive a 16th life sentence for his first victim, Stephen Hicks, in Ohio. There would be no death row for Jeffrey Dahmer. Wisconsin had abolished the death penalty decades earlier, but in a twisted sense, justice would still find its way. Hashtag life behind bars, waiting for an execution that never came. Jeffrey Dahmer was sent to the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. He was placed in solitary confinement for his own protection. Other inmates wanted him dead. But here's where Jeffrey's story takes an unexpected turn. In prison, he found religion. He was baptized. He read the Bible daily. He granted interviews where he expressed remorse, saying he wished someone had killed him years earlier to prevent his crimes. Was this genuine redemption or manipulation? Was Jeffrey Dahmer capable of real remorse, or was this just another performance? Some people believed he'd changed. His father visited regularly. Religious counselors worked with him. He seemed, by all accounts, to have found some measure of peace with his horrific past. But the families of his victims, they wanted him dead. They wanted execution, even though the state couldn't provide it. They wanted justice that felt equal to the suffering their loved ones endured. And then, on November 28, 1994, they got it. Just not from the legal system. Jeffrey Dahmer had been transferred to general population. He was assigned to a work detail with 2 other inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. Christopher Scarver was serving a life sentence for murder. He was deeply religious, and he was utterly disgusted by Jeffrey Dahmer. That morning, the 3 men were left unsupervised in the gymnasium bathroom for 20 minutes. When guards returned, Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer were lying on the floor, their skulls crushed by a 20-inch metal bar from the weight room. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal, was dead at 34 years old. Christopher Scarver later said God had told him to do it. He said Jeffrey had taunted other inmates by shaping his prison food into severed limbs and using ketchup as blood. He said Jeffrey showed no real remorse, that his religious conversion was fake. Jeffrey's father, Lionel, was devastated. He'd believed his son was genuinely trying to atone. He'd hoped Jeffrey would spend his life helping psychologists understand what created someone like him. But Jeffrey's victims' families? Many felt relief. Finally, they said, true justice had been served. So here we are, at the end of Jeffrey Dahmer's story. 17 young men and boys dead, families forever broken, a city traumatized, and a killer who never faced death row, never had a last meal prepared by the state, never spoke last words before a legal execution. Instead, his execution came from another prisoner's hands in a bathroom at a correctional facility. Does that make it less just or more? Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes were unforgivable. There's no debate about that. But his death raises profound questions about our justice system, about punishment, about redemption, and about who gets to decide when a life should end. If Wisconsin had the death penalty, would Jeffrey have been executed by the state? Would that have felt more like justice, or would it have been the same outcome with different hands delivering it? Was Christopher Scarver a vigilante delivering righteous justice, or was he a murderer himself who robbed society of the chance to study and understand what created Jeffrey Dahmer? Could Jeffrey have truly found redemption behind bars? Or was his religious conversion just the final manipulation of a man who'd spent his life deceiving everyone around him? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, could Jeffrey Dahmer have been stopped? Were there moments in his childhood, in his adolescence after his first arrest, where intervention might have prevented 17 murders? The system failed Jeffrey Dahmer's victims long before they met him. It failed to see the signs. It failed to take missing persons reports seriously. It failed Konerak Sinthasomphone the night police returned him to his killer. Maybe the real horror of Jeffrey Dahmer's story isn't just what he did, it's how easily he was able to do it. Was Christopher Scarver a hero or a murderer? Could Jeffrey Dahmer have been saved before he became the Milwaukee Cannibal? Drop your thoughts below, because these stories aren't just about monsters. They're about us, about the society that creates them, the systems that fail to stop them, and the justice we demand when it's all too late. Hit that notification bell, share this video, and remember, the victims' names deserve to be remembered more than the killers.